The terminal buzzed with a kind of restless energy that only airports seem to summon. The smell of coffee, overworked air conditioning, and nervous anticipation hung in the air like static. Gate 47 shimmered under the fluorescent lights, its display flashing the familiar glow of now boarding. Group 1. Somewhere in the crowd, a man named Ethan Ward shifted his weight and glanced at his phone, absently stirring the last of his lukewarm latte. He was used to airports, used to waiting, delays, and the quiet chaos of transit. What he wasn't used to was the sound of fury brewing just a few steps away. A voice, sharp and certain, cut through the murmur of boarding calls and rolling luggage. "Excuse me. This has to be some kind of mistake." The voice belonged to a woman in a bright yellow dress that caught every beam of light in the room. Her name, according to the boarding pass she clutched like a verdict, was Lauren. Mid-40s, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, and a confidence that bordered on command. She stood with one hand on her hip and the other raised toward the boarding sign as though summoning divine correction. The gate agent, a young woman named Melissa, with the patient posture of someone who had seen every shade of travel drama, offered her a tight, professional smile. "Ma'am, we're currently boarding Group 2. Your ticket says Group 4. We'll call your group shortly." Lauren's brow furrowed. "Group 4? That can't be right. I paid extra for Comfort Plus. I always board early. Always." Melissa glanced at the screen again, her tone unwavering. "That's correct, ma'am. Premium economy boards with Group 4. The word economy might as well have been an insult. Lauren's expression hardened, her lips parting in disbelief. "Premium economy? No, no, no. I was promised business class when I booked. You must have made mistake." Ethan looked up from his phone. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but Lauren's voice carried with the volume of someone who believed the world should listen. Around them, a few passengers pretended not to notice, while obviously doing the opposite. A man in a gray hoodie gave a low whistle under his breath, and a mother gently pulled her child closer, steering clear of the growing spectacle. Melissa, still calm, still unshaken, repeated herself. "Ma'am, your ticket says seat 17A, which is in our premium economy section. If you'd like, I can double-check." Lauren snapped before she could finish. "You don't need to double-check anything. You just need to fix it. I fly this airline all the time. I know how this works. I should be boarding before them." She gestured vaguely toward the line forming at the gate, her manicured finger landing squarely in Ethan's direction. Ethan blinked, caught mid-sip. "Me?" he asked, half amused. Lauren gave him a quick, dismissive once-over. "Yes, you. No offense, but I should be ahead of that line. Look at him. He doesn't even look like he flies often." Ethan set down his cup and smiled, the kind of small, careful smile that masks irritation. "You'd be surprised how much I fly," he said, his voice even. "Group 3 isn't exactly first-class privilege." Lauren turned away from him like she was brushing off an gnat. "This is absurd. I'm not standing here while people who paid less than me get priority." Melissa's polite expression didn't budge. "Ma'am, please step aside so we can continue boarding. I'll be happy to check your ticket once Group 2 finishes." Lauren crossed her arms, digging in. "No, I'm not moving until someone fixes this. I demand to speak to a supervisor." The air around them seemed to thicken. Passengers hesitated mid-step, the line slowing as eyes shifted toward the confrontation. The boarding announcement chime sounded overhead, but the rhythm of travel had already been interrupted. A security officer near the podium exchanged a glance with Melissa, who nodded subtly to indicate that she had it under control, for now. Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of discomfort and reluctant fascination. He'd seen arguments before, cancel flights over book seats, but something about Lauren's tone was different. It wasn't frustration. It was entitlement sharpened into arrogance. Every word she spoke dripped with the certainty that she was the exception, that rules were merely suggestions meant for other people. The supervisor arrived after a moment, a tall man in his 40s with calm eyes and a headset resting against his temple. "Good evening, ma'am," he said smoothly. "What seems to be the issue?" Lauren wasted no time. Your agent has made a mistake with my boarding group and my seat. I paid for business class. I expect to be treated accordingly." He nodded, taking the ticket from her hand. "Let me take a quick look." As he scanned the pass, Lauren continued her tirade. "This whole thing is unprofessional. You're holding up paying customers, embarrassing me in front of everyone." "You're embarrassing yourself," someone muttered from the crowd. The words were quiet, but they carried. Lauren spun around, eyes flashing. "Who said that?" Her glare swept the area until it landed on a teenage boy staring at his phone, pretending innocence. The supervisor cleared his throat. "Ma'am, your seat is in premium economy, as stated here. Boarding group 4. The system confirms that." Lauren's tone shifted from outrage to disbelief. No, that's wrong. I'll call corporate right now." She began fumbling for her phone, hands trembling more from indignation than nerves. "They'll sort this out." "Of course, you're welcome to contact them," the supervisor said evenly. "But the boarding process will continue as planned." A ripple of soft laughter passed through the waiting crowd. It was subtle, but Lauren heard it. Her face flushed, her voice rising again. "You people have no respect. I've been a loyal customer for years. You can't just treat me like some regular passenger." Melissa kept her smile, though her eyes betrayed fatigue. "Ma'am, please stand aside so we can continue boarding group 3. That number stung. Group 3. The very thing she thought she was above. Lauren's lips parted, but before she could speak, Ethan rose from his seat, slinging his laptop bag over his shoulder. He approached the line quietly, offering a brief nod to Melissa. "Group 3, he said, showing his pass. His tone was light, but the subtext was unmistakable. Lauren's gaze snapped to him, sharp and venomous. "Oh, so you get to board before me now? Wonderful." Ethan didn't look back. "Guess I'm just following the order." For a moment, no one moved. The tension hung, suspended like a held breath. Then Melissa scanned his ticket, and the gate beeped softly. Ethan walked past the counter and down the jet bridge, leaving behind the echo of Lauren's sputtering indignation. Behind him, the supervisor lowered his voice, speaking directly to her. "Ma'am, if you can't follow boarding procedures, we may need to make a note of your behavior. Please take a seat until your group is called." Lauren stared at him, uncomprehending, as if the concept of consequence was entirely foreign. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes flicked toward the passengers still watching. For a fleeting second, something uncertain crossed her face. Doubt, maybe even shame, but it vanished as quickly as it came. She turned sharply and sat down, muttering to herself, clutching her purse like a weapon. Around her, the crowd resumed its rhythm, the sounds of boarding reclaiming the air. The brief storm seemed to settle, but a quiet tension remained, like the static before lightning strikes again. From down the jet bridge, Ethan glanced back once. Through the glass, he could still see her, rigid and fuming, framed beneath the bright glow of Group 4. He exhaled softly, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Something told him this wasn't over yet. Lauren's pulse thudded in her ears. She sat stiffly in the molded plastic chair, her reflection fractured in the glossy tile beneath her heels. The gate agent's voice droned in the background, Group 3 now boarding, but all she heard was humiliation. That smug man, Ethan, gliding past her like some seasoned traveler. The quiet chuckles that followed. The agent's little smirk she swore she saw. No, she wouldn't let it end like that. Not after she'd paid nearly $900 for her ticket. She deserved better. When Group 4 was finally called, Lauren rose with deliberate grace, smoothing the creases of her dress. Her expression had settled into a calm, dangerous composure, the kind of stillness that comes right before the next explosion. Melissa greeted her with the same unwavering professionalism. "Boarding pass, please." Lauren handed it over without a word, her chin high. But as Melissa scanned the code, the machine emitted a low, uncertain tone, not the smooth approval beep everyone else had received. A tiny red light blinked on the screen. Melissa murmured, frowning slightly. "Looks like your seat assignment's been updated." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "Updated? What do you mean, updated?" "One moment." Melissa tapped a few keys, her brow furrowing deeper. It seems there was a change. I'll need to call my supervisor to confirm. The words sank in slowly, like cold water creeping beneath a locked door. A change? There shouldn't be any change. Lauren's voice sharpened again. I haven't requested anything. You'd better fix whatever you did. I didn't do anything, ma'am, Melissa said softly. But I'll get someone to take a look. She pressed the intercom, calling for her supervisor. Ethan, already seated in business class, leaned back as passengers filtered down the aisle. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when the muffled sound of raised voices reached him, curiosity tugged at his attention. Through the thin crack of the open cabin door, he caught a glimpse of yellow fabric. Lauren, of course. Back at the gate, the supervisor returned, clipboard in hand. Ms. Grant, he asked evenly, reading her name from the boarding pass. Can I have a word, please? She followed him aside, though her posture radiated annoyance. If this is about that so-called boarding issue earlier, I've already explained everything. Your employee was rude, dismissive, and completely unhelpful. I understand you are frustrated, the supervisor replied, voice smooth and measured. However, our staff reported that your behavior became disruptive. According to airline policy, we have the right to make seating adjustments when a passenger's conduct interferes with operations. For a heartbeat, she didn't process it. Then her voice cracked with disbelief. Seating adjustments? What kind of adjustments? He met her eyes, calm but firm. You've been reassigned to a different section of the plane. Her hand tightened around the boarding pass. Reassigned? To where? Economy, ma'am. The words hung in the air like a dropped plate. Her jaw slackened. You can't be serious. The supervisor didn't flinch. It's already been processed. You'll receive a partial refund after the flight. People in the waiting area were pretending not to stare, but their sideways glances betrayed them. A young couple exchanged amused looks. The man in the gray hoodie from earlier coughed to hide a laugh. Lauren's skin flushed a deep crimson. This is outrageous, she barked. You can't just decide that. I paid for premium. I was promised certain privileges. Melissa's expression remained neutral. Privileges are based on conduct as well as fare class, ma'am. Lauren's breath quickened, but she could feel the balance of power slipping. The supervisor was calm, immovable, immune to her tone. Around them, boarding continued, each beep of the scanner punctuating her helplessness. Finally, she hissed, You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone hears about it. Of course, the supervisor said simply. You're free to file a formal complaint through customer relations. There was nothing left to say. Lauren snatched the new boarding pass from Melissa's hand and stormed toward the jet bridge, heels striking the floor like hammer blows. The red print on her ticket mocked her. Seat 32B. Inside the aircraft, the air was cooler, sterile with a faint scent of disinfectant and coffee. She marched down the narrow aisle, her dress brushing armrests, bumping shoulders as passengers tried to make room. Murmured apologies followed her, but none reached her. The yellow of her dress, so bright, so bold, now drew every eye in the cramped space. When she reached row 32, a man was already seated by the window, earbuds in, oblivious. A teenager in the middle seat looked up nervously as she approached. Excuse me, she said tightly. That's my seat. The man stood to let her in without a word. She squeezed past, her perfume filling the stale air. As she sat, the seatbelt buckle clicked, final and metallic. She stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, knuckles white. Meanwhile, Ethan reclined in his wide seat, a quiet hum of satisfaction beneath his composure. He wasn't the type to gloat, but he couldn't deny the symmetry of it. He'd seen enough arrogance rewarded in his lifetime. It was rare to see it corrected so swiftly. The hum of the engines deepened as boarding completed. A flight attendant moved through the aisle, checking seat numbers. She paused briefly at row 32, confirming something on her tablet before moving on. Lauren caught the motion and leaned toward her. Excuse me, miss, when will drinks be served? The attendant offered a polite smile. Once we reach cruising altitude, ma'am. In business class, they start earlier, Lauren muttered. I'm sure they do, the attendant replied kindly, then continued down the aisle. Lauren leaned back, swallowing her frustration. Around her, passengers settled into quiet conversations, headphones, and books. She felt surrounded, trapped in a sea of indifference. No one here cared who she was, what she paid, or what she thought she deserved. For the first time, her outrage had nowhere to go. Above, the seatbelt light dinged. The engines roared louder. The plane began to roll. Ethan glanced toward the cabin curtain separating business from economy. He could almost imagine her fuming back there, rehearsing her complaint for customer service, her indignation burning hotter than the jet engines themselves. The thought made him smile, though faintly. Justice, he thought, didn't always need to shout. Sometimes it just needed a gate number. Halfway through the flight, turbulence rattled the cabin. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We'll be experiencing some light turbulence. Ethan did so, looking out the window at the roiling clouds below. For a moment, the vibration of the aircraft mirrored the unease that had rippled through the terminal earlier. Somewhere beyond the curtain, a drink clattered on a tray table. In row 32, Lauren clutched the armrest as the plane shuddered. The teenager beside her, calm and unfazed, offered her a faint smile. It's just turbulence, he said. Happens all the time. She managed a stiff nod. I know, she replied, but her voice was small now, stripped of its earlier authority. When the shaking eased, the tension didn't quite fade. She turned her gaze to the aisle, where a flight attendant passed carrying a tray of bottled water. Would you like something to drink? The attendant asked. Lauren hesitated, her pride still raw. Then, quietly, just water. The attendant handed it to her with a kind smile. Of course, ma'am. As she took a sip, the taste was bitter, metallic. She set it down, untouched, her reflection trembling faintly in the plastic cup. Up front, Ethan adjusted his seat and closed his eyes, unaware that a notification had just buzzed through his phone, a message from a friend, forwarding a video link. Someone in the terminal had captured the entire confrontation at Gate 47. The caption read, "When entitlement takes flight." Morning light filtered through the cabin windows in thin, golden bands. The aircraft had landed an hour ago, but the story that began at Gate 47 was far from over. The air outside the airport was sharp and bright, the kind that felt like a reset, but for Lauren, it only sharpened the sting of what had happened. She moved briskly through the terminal with her phone in hand, the echo of her heels loud against the tile. Every step was propelled by humiliation disguised as determination. She had spent the last 2 hours drafting a furious email to the airline, one she believed would fix everything: compensation, apology, acknowledgement. The world would know how unfairly she had been treated. At a nearby cafe, Ethan sat with a black coffee cooling beside his laptop. He wasn't thinking about Lauren, not really, just idly checking his notifications while waiting for his connecting flight. Then he saw it. A familiar thumbnail caught his eye, a freeze frame of the gate from earlier, the yellow dress unmistakable. The video title read, "Passenger loses it over boarding order. Instant karma ensues." He clicked it, and there she was. The whole scene, her voice rising, her demand to board early, the supervisor's calm response, captured in vivid detail. Someone had filmed the entire altercation from the seating area, probably the same man in the gray hoodie. The video had already crossed 200,000 views in less than 12 hours. Ethan watched, half in disbelief, half in inevitability. The comments were merciless. "She really thought the universe revolved around Group 4, one said. Another read, "Gate 47, where entitlement gets downgraded." There were memes, slow-motion edits, even a dubbed remix of her shouting about deserving better. He closed the laptop, unsure whether to laugh or feel sorry. There was a brief flicker of sympathy, brief, because as he recalled the way she'd spoken to that young gate agent, the sympathy evaporated. Actions have echoes, he thought. Hers were just louder than most. Lauren's phone buzzed incessantly as she reached the taxi line. Notifications stacked like a cruel rhythm. Texts, mentions, pings from social media. Her stomach sank as she opened one. A coworker had sent her a message with a single link and 3 words. "Is this you?" Her throat went dry. She tapped it. The video played, the sound of her own voice, shrill, indignant, unmistakable, filling her ears. Her image filled the screen, captured mid-gesture, face twisted in anger. It was like seeing herself from outside her body. And what stared back wasn't confidence. It was entitlement, naked and ugly. No one at the terminal had said her name, but it didn't matter. Someone in the comments had found her profile, matched her face to a company photo, and within hours, her name was spreading faster than the video itself. Lauren Grant. The internet had a new villain, and she had no defense left that didn't sound like excuse. In the back seat of the taxi, she called the airline, her voice trembling with the same defiance that had failed her at the gate. "I want to file a formal complaint," she said. The customer service agent's voice on the other end was kind but careful. "Of course, ma'am. Can you confirm your booking number?" Lauren rattled it off. There was a pause, the quiet click of keys being pressed. Then the agent spoke again. "I do see a note on your file regarding the incident at Gate 47. It appears your ticket was reviewed under our conduct policy. Unfortunately, any disputes regarding that decision will need to go through written correspondence." Written correspondence. The words sounded sterile, final. She hung up, the weight of reality pressing down on her chest. Outside the window, traffic shimmered in the midday heat, but she barely saw it. For the first time, she wondered if she had gone too far. Ethan's flight connected later that afternoon. As he sat waiting at his next gate, he overheard 2 strangers talking animatedly beside him. "Did you see that video? The lady who got downgraded for yelling at the staff," one said. "That was wild. I can't believe people act like that in public." He smiled faintly, not out of mockery, but at the absurdity of how small the world could feel when a single moment went viral. He didn't mention that he'd been there, that he'd watched it all unfold in real time. Some stories didn't need his commentary. They told themselves. Meanwhile, Lauren scrolled through the comments with a mix of fury and despair. Every attempt she made to explain herself was met with sarcasm. "I was mistreated by the staff," she wrote under one clip, but her words were buried under replies. "Sure, Karen, maybe follow the rules next time. Premium attitude, economy manners." She shut her phone off. Silence felt safer than the noise. Days passed. The video reached 1 million views. News outlets picked it up, spinning it into a symbol of modern entitlement. For a while, Lauren stayed home, avoiding eye contact at the grocery store, skipping calls from friends. But the story lingered like a shadow, impossible to escape. Ethan's life went on. Another city, another gate, another coffee. Yet every now and then, when someone mentioned airport drama, he remembered the yellow dress, the raised voice, the quiet satisfaction of justice unfolding right where it happened. Not the gloating kind, but the sort that restored balance, a small correction in a world that often looked away. A week later, as fate would have it, they crossed paths again. Not face to face, but almost. Ethan was boarding a flight from the same airline when he saw a familiar name flash on the upgrade list at the counter. Grant, L. She was listed for consideration, pending approval. The irony wasn't lost on him. The gate agent, a different one this time, typed something, frowned, then shook her head slightly. "Denied," she murmured, marking the note on the screen. Ethan didn't react, just handed over his pass. "Group 3, he said again, the same words as before. The sound of the scanner beeped, clear and approving. As he walked down the jet bridge, a calm settled over him, a sense that things, in their quiet, imperfect way, had found equilibrium. The air smelled faintly of jet fuel and recycled air, familiar and grounding. Behind him, voices murmured, engines whirred, and the world turned on, as it always did. Lauren watched the gate screen flash her name one last time before it disappeared. For a moment, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Regret. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it was there. She clutched her boarding pass tighter, took a breath, and followed the line toward the economy cabin without a word.